Hi there, welcome everybody. In Air's Kitchen, episode 6. I'm here today with Violet and Blue and Clementine. The very first episode we did brownies. I did it with all 3 kids, and Blue thought whenever we do sweets we should do it with everybody. So I think it sounds like a good idea. So for now we'll all help when we make sweets. Today we're going to make Wacky cake. So this is a recipe. It's from my grandma, and I'm really excited to share it with everybody. It has a special place in Clover's history and in my history. My mom would make it when I was a kid. And it was a recipe my grandma really loved a lot. I think I can show you guys. We're running around to this. Here's this is a recipe card that my mom found. This is like my grandma's original recipe card. And this is the recipe we'll be following. There's a back of the card as well. So this is the thing I know about my grandma really loving this recipe is that it didn't dirty many dishes, and you'll see we're just going to use this one pan, which is what we're going to bake it in, and then we're going to mix it in this, we're going to bake it in this, and we're going to then serve ourselves out of this. So that was something my grandma really loved about it. I remember when I was a kid I really liked making it because, as you'll see, you get to make little wells, which is a lot of fun. And this recipe was something I always had when I was a kid, and it hit me when I was running Clover. I was trying to think of a good cupcake recipe, and I thought maybe the Wacky cake would be a good cupcake recipe. And when I went to look at it, I noticed that there was no dairy in it, and no eggs in it, which is pretty unusual for a cake. It's a really moist and delicious cake, but it's made without those things. And so it became the foundation for our cupcakes. In the early days of Clover, whenever an employee would have, this is when we had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 trucks, but when an employee had a birthday, we'd make brownies, or we'd make cupcakes on the truck that day, and we'd usually make them to some way that was special for the person having a birthday. And like if we had somebody who really loved mint, we would make mint cupcakes. We made some unusual ones. I think one time we made like potato cupcakes, or potato chips. Somebody loved potato chips. And then we'd give them away to customers. So we'd make a couple hundred cupcakes, and just everybody who came that day would get a cupcake. And it wasn't announced. It was just a really fun thing. It was something we couldn't really keep up because as we got bigger, I wasn't able to make cupcakes for every single employee because we have be making cupcakes every day of the year now. But it was a fun thing in our past. And then we also used this recipe when it came time to figure out how to make our whoopie pies. Whoopie pies were traditionally from Maine, but I was thinking that this particular cake might be really good for that. So we adapted the recipe a little bit, and when you have a whoopie pie at Clover right now, it's Wacky cake, done a little bit differently, but this is the base recipe. So we're going to make this up today, and we're going to do this in real time. So the plan is we're going to put this all together, we're going to put it in the oven. It needs to cook for about 30 minutes, and then when we take it out, we'll frost it. And I'm going to try to be entertaining during that 30 minutes while it's in the oven. Maybe you guys can help me a little bit with that. All right, so to get started, what you're going to need for this is you're going to need flour and sugar. So again, this is a recipe. I think that the origins of this, given that there's no dairy in it and no eggs, it's probably a Depression era recipe, and it's a recipe like most of the recipes we're focusing on right now that you should be able to make with simple items that are in your pantry. So we've got sugar, flour, and oil. We need a little bit of vinegar. Can you grab vinegar? The cider vinegar works well for that. Yeah. We're going to need cocoa. So we've got some cocoa powder. Actually, let's use this one. So we get some cocoa powder. I'll trade you. And so there's our vinegar. Cocoa powder. This is like a chocolate cake. And then we need salt. So we've got some salt here. We need oil, and we've got oil here. And then we're going to need some vanilla. So this is a vanilla extract, but you could use any other vanilla extract. It'd be fine. Now for the frosting, my grandma has little notes about different kinds of frostings. She said it's really good with a broiled frosting. That's how we're going to do it today. What she calls a broiled frosting is a frosting you make with coconut. So that's what these are here for. So that's for the frosting, which we'll make later. And it also has a little bit of heavy cream in it. I almost forgot baking soda is in as well. So this particular frosting is not vegan, obviously, but there are other kinds of frostings you can make for this cake that would be, and it would be delicious with lots of different frosting treatments. You know, we could probably make this vegan pretty easily if we wanted to just eliminate the heavy cream and use the fake butter. You want to grab some fake butter out of the fridge? Maybe we'll give that a try.
Yay!
Clementine's a little disappointed and Blue's happy. So
we have so many of them.
So that's what we're gonna make today. This is going to be a lot of fun. My grandma's notes say that if you eliminate the heavy cream or if you reduce the heavy cream, you need to make sure you don't bake it as long under the broiling. So we'll explore that a little bit. All right. So we're gonna set aside the frosting ingredients. We're gonna start out with the cake ingredients, and let's have Violet measure out our flour. So Vi, you want to get a measuring cup to measure the flour? All right. Yeah, that's great. Bring it on over. The big one's great.
Yeah.
And you want to get the sifter there, Clementine? So when making baked goods, this is an optional thing, but I think you often get much better results, is just sifting the flour. This is a fairly fine sifter. Another thing you could use for this is, use this. Goodness. My booby trap. You could use this. This is my flour sifter. My flour sifter is more coarse. It sort of goes faster. And this is a little more fine. It's going to go more slowly. So Violet, you want to measure that out? But we need 1.5 cups of flour. Blue, you want to do the sifting?
Sure.
You can do either one. Either one will work fine.
I'll try this one.
And then a little trick is you can use the sifting to not only sift the flour, but you can also use that to break up a baking soda that you're using as well. So what we'll do is we'll put 1.5 cups of flour in there. You're going to need a 1/2 cup measure too, sweetie. Here you go. Yep.
This reminds me of powdered sugar. Yeah.
You can just imagine that. Don't eat it. Clem, can you turn off the fan up there? I think it's a little better for the audio. You got that? Sweet. All right. Awesome. And good job. And then we need some baking soda. So Violet, we need 1 teaspoon of that. You want to do that one, or Clem, do you want to do the baking soda? 1 teaspoon.
Dad, can you pass me the baking soda?
So baking soda is a really fun thing on it. I used to really like this when I was a kid. It has like a little built-in scraper. You want to show how that works, Clem, in case people haven't done that before? So you can reach in and then scrape it over that little scraper to make sure you have a level spoon, which is super cool. And put it in here, and so that will let it sift in with the flour to break it up in case there's chunks. You can see there's some chunks there. I'm just going to rub those with my finger right through the mesh. But that's going to make sure I don't have a chunk of baking soda in the final thing. All right, next, let's put some cocoa powder in there. It's 3 tablespoons of cocoa. And I would do the exact same thing with this. So let's run that through here too, okay? You got, here, wait, 3 tablespoons. Clem's got it. It's not even sweet though, Blue. Got 3 tablespoons of that. And so Clem's doing, this is when you do a dry measure, you want to have it level. So when you hold it up, you have, it's not dipping under the spoon, it's not dipping over the spoon, but it's level with the spoon. So that's a nice way to measure. No, it looks really good. You did a good job. All right, so we get those through. So now we have in there, we've got flour, we've got cocoa, we've got baking soda. I think we need some sugar in there. It says 1 full cup of sugar. You want to get that in there, Vi? Sugar's a little caked there. There you go.
Yes. Should I just put it right in?
Yep, put it right in. Okay. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And guys, we're running low on salt, unfortunately. You're gonna have to dig in there a little to get it out.
Just like, it's like hard.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so these are all the dry ingredients. As we're baking things, we're gonna pick recipes that are pretty foolproof and really delicious, but recipes that give you a lot of margin for error. And we're gonna go through them step by step like this. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, "Have you tried one of the recipes?" Well, I'm not the baker, and I think we should all think of ourselves as bakers. And we're gonna do recipes that anybody can bake. So this needs to be mixed up now. When we do baking though, you're often gonna see that we do the dry ingredients separate from the liquid ingredients. That's sort of the case here, but this one's a little bit unusual. You'll see in a minute. So we're gonna just mix that up to the point where it all looks brown. That's how we'll know it's mixed up. So this is all the dry ingredients are getting evenly dispersed there, so we don't have like a clump of baking soda, a clump of sugar, and a clump of flour, and a clump of cocoa. That wouldn't taste very good. Yeah. Good job. And that's important. What Blue's doing is getting into that corner, making sure there's no cocoa hiding out in there. And we're getting pretty close to having this well mixed. Not quite. But this is one of the reasons we don't add the liquid ingredients until we mix all the dry, is it gives us an opportunity to make sure those dry ingredients are actually well incorporated with one another. Let's see here. Okay. All right. That looks pretty good. Now, we need somebody to make wells. You want to do that, Pilot?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the part that I always thought was really fun. We're going to make 3 wells in there. Go ahead. You're doing a great job.
To go home. Yeah.
1 well. Yep, and my grandma says back with the back of the spoon, you make these wells.
Place just extra. There's a little extra, so just put that.
All right, good job. So we got to make sure one of those wells is big enough to take our oil, which I think it is. So we're going to need 6 tablespoons of oil. So you've got the oil there. Here it is. Let's see, 6 tablespoons then. So this is probably one of my earlier cooking memories, is making this cake.
I don't think we've ever made it before.
Well, you just might not remember. Maybe it's a little too early a memory for you. Or maybe you just ate it. You'll probably remember when it comes out. So let's do 6 tablespoons of oil. Mm-hmm. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the way you're holding it, you're going a little bit short on everyone. Here, I'll just show you. I'll show you about that. So when you're holding it down a little bit. So as you filled up, it looked like it was full, but if you were level, you could fit a little bit more. So we're just gonna put a little bit more oil in there.
Okay.
Okay, that's gonna be about 6. All right, now we're gonna do a cup of water. You wanna grab that? Awesome.
I don't remember this.
That's great. So
Don't remember it.
you can put the water in this one, and this is where it gets exciting. Oh, is it gonna mix? Stop, stop. All right, I put the rest of the water in that one. Oh no, I think, uh-oh. I think it's gonna be okay? Oh, we didn't build the wells deep enough. Here, we'll build this one a little deeper. Okay. All right, that's the excitement and anticipation of this recipe. Now we need to add vinegar, and we're going to add vinegar into the oil well, which is a really wild little trick. So that's going to keep the vinegar from reacting until we mix everything. So we're going to want to do 1 tablespoon of vinegar, and into the 1 tablespoon into the oil well. Right, put it in the middle so it doesn't touch the flour. You got it, Clem.
No,
Isn't this an exciting recipe? There's a lot of excitement with this recipe. All right, next is the vanilla. So we're gonna do a little bit of this, and this is gonna be 1 teaspoon. This goes into the water well.
Which water well?
Either one. Well, my grandma's recipe actually said 1 well for water, 1 well for oil, 1 well for vanilla, but the vanilla would have been pretty lonely in a well all by itself. There we go. I think this is how we made it when I was a kid. All right, guys. So let's check if we've got all the ingredients. Flour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sugar. Cocoa. Baking soda. Salt. Water. Oil. Vinegar. Vanilla.
Yeah.
All right. So now it's ready to mix. So who wants to mix it? You want to do it, Violet? Go ahead. You can do it. So you're just gonna mix the whole thing up now. Just go ahead and mix it all together. There you go. Yep. It's all right. Just get it. So we'll just go around the outside and make sure all of that's going to be part of the mix. Okay. It's a really fun cake, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know any other cake like this one. So the vinegar is reacting right now with the baking soda, and it's going to be creating bubbles. You'll find recipes that have baking soda almost always have vinegar. Sometimes that's in the form of buttermilk or something like that, and sometimes it's just vinegar itself. Sometimes it's yogurt, but you need some sort of an acid to activate that buttermilk. Okay, so this is the batter now, and this is a little trick when you're spreading out batter. So you can just use the back of your spoon or your spatula and spin it around. Just gently mix it out like that. There we go. And that'll settle a little bit as it starts to get warm and cook. You want to pop that in the oven, Blue?
Sure.
All right. Count down 25 minutes. Okay, so we're gonna set a timer for 25 minutes. Let's see, I'll look at the time. How's that? So we're gonna at about 1/4 that should be ready. And now we're going to need to make the frosting for it. So let's get that mixed up right now so it's ready to go. Think we should make the vegan one, guys, or think we should make
vegan.
What do you think?
Vegan. Vegan. Maybe just stay with the regular. No, vegan. Vegan.
We could do half and half. Although Graham said to cook it less long if you don't have the heavy cream in.
Yeah,
We'll do the traditional one today. I think that it would be a pretty easy substitute. You'd leave out the heavy cream and you'd use fake butter instead of real butter. But we'll stick with the other one right now. So we're gonna do 1 cup of brown sugar.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can put that in the fridge. Sorry, we'll try that another day. Then we'll have an excuse to make this twice. All right, we need 1 cup of brown sugar in that bowl. Yeah, want me to help you?
Didn't Chunks put some molasses?
Yeah, you're right, Blue. Yeah. There you go. Can you smell it? It smells like molasses, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I'm going to go rinse this off because we'll need to mix it up a little bit. Okay, then we need 4 tablespoons of heavy cream. You want to grab that bag?
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we need 1 tablespoon of butter and 1 cup of coconut. So who wants to measure out the butter? So we don't want to get that dirty spoon in there, Vi, so let me get you a new spoon to use. So why don't you use that to scoop it into the 1 tablespoon so you can see how much you got. Mm-hmm. Nice job. Yep, keep going. Looks good. All right, so we'll put that in there. And then we need coconut, 1 cup of coconut. So we have 2 different kinds of coconut here. This is a really finely shredded coconut, which is not typically what I would have in this recipe. These are some really big coconut flakes, which are sort of bigger than I'm used to, but I think they're probably a little bit better choice for this. My grandma had this labeled a broiled frosting, and then she described it. I wonder, I mean, it makes me wonder if it's a frosting that she would have used on other things too, or if it's a style of frosting. It's I've never made this frosting except for Wacky cake, but it seems from those notes on her card, which I was just looking at before the show, that maybe this is a type of frosting she would have used on other things. So I have here just those ingredients, just the butter and the cream and a cup of coconut, and that's all mixed up, and that's going to be my frosting. We're going to put this on while the cake's still warm. That's one of our little instructions, and we're going to put it under a broiler. So that's pretty fun to watch, but we're going to wait until we're ready for that. So if you put this over by the oven, that'd be great. Honey, and then Violet and Blue, can you guys help me tidy everything up here?
Sure.
I thought while we're waiting for that to happen, I will take some time to answer some of the questions people have sent in, which I thought could be a really good use of time. So I'll do that. So I've had questions, had a bunch of questions come in last week, and we hadn't had a chance to get to all of them. I thought we'd get to a few of those today. One was about sharpening knives, and another question was about cast iron, how you season it. So I thought we could spend a little bit of time on those. I will also open up the YouTube stream in a few minutes and take a peek. So if anybody has other questions, and some of them we might be able to answer right away, and some of them we might be able to get to on a future episode. Just put this away. So let's start out. Let's see. All right. So I thought we'd start out with knife sharpening, and I'm going to erase the Wacky cake recipe there. I will take a picture of it so I can share it with you all later. Oh, there's another question that came up too, wondering about the vanilla beans. That's a quick one to answer. Do I grab that those vanilla beans? Right there. So let's do this and then we'll get to the knife sharpening. Vanilla extract is what this is, and I'm running low on it. That's because I'm out of vodka. So to make vanilla extract, all you need is vanilla pods and vodka, and then you pour the vodka to cover it and you just leave it for a while. It takes a couple weeks before the oils and the flavor are extracted from the bean. But you can do this with a spent vanilla bean. So if you ever buy a vanilla bean for a specific recipe, like creme brulee or something, and you've cut the vanilla bean open and you've scraped it out and you've used it for that recipe, and you have that leftover vanilla pod, you can then put it in a jar and put vodka over it, and you'll get yourself vanilla extract, and it's super yummy vanilla extract. It smells really good, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And there's really nothing else to making this. I never made vanilla extract myself until one of our friends gave it to us for Christmas a few years ago. Megan gave that to us, remember? And since then we've been making it ourselves. This is a vanilla bean. I think I got this from Curio Spices in Cambridge, and their shop is closed right now, but they are still doing their online sales. These little vanilla pods are pretty expensive, but the really exciting thing is you can use them for a lot of different things. So this is one of the things you can use them for. Another great thing to do with spent vanilla, I don't have this going right now, but we may as well, is you can just take your jar of sugar. So I've got my jar of sugar there, and you can take one of your vanilla pods and you can just stick it in the jar of sugar. And what will happen is that sugar it'll sort of preserve and dry out the vanilla pod, but it'll also take a lot of the oils and flavor from it. So your sugar will have like a slight but pleasant vanilla-y taste. And you can also pull that pod out and cut a little piece of it and use it for something if you want to in the future. So it's another fun thing to do with vanilla pods. All right, great question. So I'll check in on more questions in a minute, but I'm going to spend some time answering a question from last week, which is about knife sharpening. We could do a long show all about knife sharpening. We could do a series of shows about knife sharpening. It's a really fun topic. To start with, I'm just going to give you guys some basics and then encourage you to play around. So if you can look at the tip of a knife, I think we would imagine that it goes like this. But in most cases, the knives are sharpened a little differently than that. In most cases, the knives have an angle like this, and then an angle like that. So they're a little bit sharper angle as they get to the cutting tip than they are behind it. And so that's how most knives are sharpened. So you have these two angles that you're sharpening to. That's how my knives are sharpened. If you have a Western style knife, these angles will all be a little bit more wedge-like. If you have a Japanese knife, those angles will be a little more slim. And so this might be 15 degrees, this angle right here might be like 15 degrees. And then here, this angle might be 22 degrees, or something like that. So these angles will be a little different. But this one is more shallow, and this one is a little less shallow. But they tend to be sharpened the same way. So let me grab a knife. So this is the knife I use every day. I have probably more knives than I really need to have, but I like them a lot. But this is the one I go back to all the time. The things I like about this knife, I like the wooden handle because as it gets wet, or even if it gets a little bit greasy, it tends to have like a nice grip. I think the wood works that way. I don't like metal handled knives. I like the thickness of the tang. Gives this knife like a nice stiffness for me. It bends a little bit, but not too much. I like that. I like how I can fit my hand on this knife. So this is usually how I hold it. There's different ways to hold knives, but in this case, it's a nice clearance for my knuckles, and it's like comfortable and nicely balanced in my fingers right there. And I like the rock on this knife too. So knives will have different rocks on them. This is a Japanese knife. These fun hammer marks, what look like hammer marks, actually are. And this is called the Damascus blade, where it's folded. So the steel was folded and then hammered and folded and hammered and folded and hammered. So it created strata, layers. And then when the knife was being finished, they ground it down here. And what they did is they revealed those different layers. So these little squiggly marks on this blade are actually showing you the layers of the folded metal. And because it's along that way, you can see them a little better. So this is like the Grand Canyon or something. It's like all the little layers. I've seen knives that fake this, that actually use like a laser to cut a little pattern in there to look like that, which is a really goofy thing. But I guess people maybe like the look of it, but didn't know why it's that way. So what we're going to do is, first thing I would say about this is, I would encourage everybody to play around with sharpening their knives. You can get a block to sharpen your knife, and it won't cost you that much money. And I think that a lot of people are afraid they're going to do something to hurt the knife, but knives are really robust, and you can undo just about any damage you can do to it. The only exception there is like chipping it, so don't hammer at frozen things with your knife. That's one of the things you can do that it's really hard to recover from. I had an employee once using one of my knives, dropped it, and it shattered in the middle, and we used it for a while to cut, so it was like that. So we used it to cut chocolate. Yeah, we cut chocolate with it for a while. Finally, we retired it all the way. But that can hurt a knife. But outside of that, just using the sharpening stone, you're probably not going to hurt the knife too badly. What I've got here is, I've got a sharpening stone that has two sides, which is pretty common for these stones. One side is more coarse, and so says number 300. One side's a little more fine. This says number 1000. And you can see mine's pretty well used. I've had it for a long time. If you buy one of these and take care of it, you're not going to have to buy another for a very long time. This one came with a little rubber grip, which is sort of nice. It keeps it from moving around too much. But there's lots of different styles of sharpening blocks. There are other ways to sharpen knives as well. You can have things that you stick them in. You can have mechanical sharpeners. I think you probably have a little less control than you do with this style, which is the block. So I prefer this and I like it a lot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it, this knife's in pretty good shape right now, but I'm going to still start off on this coarse grip, mostly just to show you guys what we're doing. And I'm working on so just to make that clear again, so imagine this is the middle line of the blade. There's an angle here, that's a certain angle. Then there's a point where that angle changes, and that's another angle there. The part we're going to be working on right now is this part of the blade. So this is the part of the blade that we're going to be working on. And what I'm going to do is, my pressure is very, very light. Mostly what I'm focused on is, I'm focused on the angle I'm holding the blade at, and I'm listening with my ears. So I don't know how well you can pick it up on the camera, but there's like a high-pitched noise that's not very pleasant right now. And I'm listening to that noise. And I'm familiar with the angle that I sharpen at, because I sharpen with this knife. And I always sharpen at the same angle, so I know what angle I'm approaching it at. I'm used to it. But as you're working with your knife, you will get used to the angle that it wants. You just sort of feel it. And I'm not putting much pressure on the knife. I have a little more pressure on it going forward than I do coming back. So I could do this. This is really what's happening. It's sort of coming back over the blade, but it's coming back without a lot of weight. And I'm listening to the sound of it. So a lot of this judgment that I'm making, it has to do with the sound. You can all see, as I'm moving it around, I'm trying to cover the whole stone. So I'm not like grinding away at one part of the stone, because I want that stone to stay flat as well. Now, again, I don't know how much picked up on the mic, but the sound of it's changing a little bit to my ears. It's a little bit less of a high-pitched noise, and in general, it's getting less noisy altogether. And so that means I'm starting to get a more smooth surface. Because the noise is coming from, the high-pitched noise is coming from the blade having lots of uneven surfaces against the grinding stone. There's a little bit of feeling that changes too. I'd say it feels like it's starting to slide a little better. But this is something you're just going to try out, and you're going to get the feeling of it just by trying it. Now, let's go ahead to the other side now. So I can do this that way, or if you prefer, you can just move your hand and go this way. It's really sort of a preference thing. And I'm trying to move evenly across the stone and also across the blade. But again, you're not going to hurt anything. I just would encourage everybody to start trying this out. It's a nice skill to develop. It's sort of a peaceful thing to do. Okay, so I feel good about that, and that's the rough side. And now I'm going to turn my blade over. Whoops. Sorry. Do you mind grabbing a little towel to clean it up, Lou? All right, so don't do that part. That's not part of the lesson. It doesn't help the knife get any sharper. All right, so we'll come back here. And this is a more fine side of the stone, and you can see I'm keeping that stone wet. I was soaking the stone for a little while before I brought it out, so it soaked in water for a half hour or so. And now I'm lubricating it as I go. And this side of the stone is really sucking up the water. I'm just sort of feeling that, so I have to keep adding until I get to a place where it feels wet to me. And now, you hear how that's getting almost quiet? So, a lot of this is what it sounds like to me. Thanks, Blue. Alright, so that's getting to a nice quiet blade. Alright, let's put a little more on. Let's try this side. You see that side's already making a little more noise. Hear this? Hear that versus this? Okay. I'm just starting to smell the cake. I use my nose a lot trying to figure out if things are done in the oven. And I think when you first start to smell something, it's time to start thinking about it. It's probably not quite done yet, but it's probably getting close. And I just looked up there at the clock, and we said we were going to check on it at quarter of, and it's right now 20 of, so sounds about right. Okay, so this is great. That's about the amount of time I would spend sharpening this. And we could test it on some vegetable or something, but it should slice through really nicely. Maybe I have... There we go. I've got a lemon. Now before I cut into this, because lemons are precious right now. This is like our last one. I'm going to wash my blade so it doesn't have all that metal on it. Okay. And now, I should have done it before and after, but actually I can just come over here on the skin and you can see like I shouldn't have too much trouble bringing that right through that skin, controlling the thickness and the direction of the cut because it's not providing a lot of resistance. All right, there we go. And I should be able to feel it, it's even grabbing the table just a little bit, because the sharpness of the blade is cutting into the wood a little more than it normally would. But it feels really nice to me. And then in between uses, I'll just show you all this really quickly. This is called a steel. I don't know why that's its name, but it's called steel. A steel does not sharpen a knife. But if you run the knife blade up and down the steel, it can help lengthen the amount of time between sharpening. So what happens here is when you're using the knife, so imagine I've got this blade, it comes down like this, and when I'm using the knife to cut things, the little end of it can end up developing, can be bent one way or another way. So if you're looking along the blade of the knife, you may see like some of it bent one way, some of it bent the other way. So like the blade itself is sort of bending different ways depending on what it hit into when you're cutting, because it's really, really thin down at this point. And what the steel does is when you go down one side, it takes all those little errant pieces of metal and flips them that way. When you come down the other side, it flips them back. And if you do it the right way, you take all those little pieces along that blade and you push some there and you push some there so they're all lined up again. So at the tip of the blade, you have like nice alignment, and that lets it cut really well. So what I would do is each day after I've used my knife, I would run it on the steel a little bit. If you're in commercial kitchen, you might do that every half hour or so. And that can give you maybe a month or more between sharpenings if you're using the steel frequently. If you weren't using the steel, you might find you had to sharpen your knife every couple days. So it really prolongs the sharpness of the blade. And I was probably talking a little bit too much. There's a lot more to learn about knife sharpening, but the main message I would take for you all is just grab yourself a stone. They're not very expensive, and then just start practicing with your knives. It's a really nice skill to develop, and don't be scared of hurting your knife because there's nothing you're going to do to it you can't recover from. Use your ears, trust your senses. It's something you just learn with practice, but have fun with it. And don't cut yourself. Although, for most people, the danger with a sharp knife is if you're used to using a dull knife and then your knife is sharp, you may not respect the blade the way you should. That said, I think it's much less dangerous over time to have a sharp blade than a dull blade, because dull blades don't perform the way you're expecting. They get stuck and then they jerk out. A sharp blade is going to have a much more consistent cut all the time, and it's much less force to cut with, and so you're much less likely to hurt yourself with it. So I think that's probably all I should say today for knives. Let's go check on the Wacky cake. It's smelling pretty good. We're a little bit early checking on it. Now, the puppy dogs have been like not in the kitchen every other day. They've like stayed out of it, but today they decided to nap in here. This is Tulip right here, and that's Snoring. And they're both pretty big, so if you see us walking a little awkwardly in the kitchen today, we're probably tripping over them. All right. So we're going to reach in the oven here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a very clean knife, and we're going to stick it in the center and bring it out. And that means it's totally cooked. So I had a little, I'll do that again. I have a little moisture on there, but I don't have any sticky dough. I should have done this a little earlier. I thought I was catching it earlier than I did, but I should have done it a little earlier just to show you what that looks like when there's, when it's not all the way cooked. I'm now turning it on broil. So we're going to give it a minute or two to heat up. And while it's heating up, we're going to get the frosting ready. So different ovens will broil different ways. This oven has a wonderful broil. I really like how it works. But we're probably going to take one of these shelves. I'm going to move it up a little closer to the broil. But most ovens have a broiling function. What you're going to want to do is turn on broil and then wait for a few minutes. This is a gas oven, and so the broil is a bunch of gas flames. It needs a few minutes to get hot. If you're using an electric oven, similar thing, the little elements, and it will probably heat up a little bit faster. So what we're going to do is we're going to let that broil fire up here, and then we're going to put this cake under that with the frosting on it. And the fun thing about broiling is it goes really fast, and you can leave the door open and watch it while it's happening. All right, and then maybe while we're waiting for that broil to heat up, we should just look and see if there's other questions people have. So there's the puppy dogs. Okay, so how big is the pan? Is a question from the audience. I believe this is 9 inches. I have 8-inch pans and 9-inch pans. And it's funny, I was going to call my mom. I did call my mom right before the show to ask her. A lot of times when I'm baking family recipes, I call her up to ask her because it's her mother who these recipes are coming from. And she would know what size pan, but I'm hoping I picked the right one. The cake looks really good in this pan, so I'm pretty sure that it worked out pretty well. And let me pull up any other questions, so you just give me a second. All right. Okay, so sorry about that. I did call my mom right before the show to ask her. A lot of times when I'm baking family recipes, I call her up to ask her because it's her mother who these recipes are coming from, and she would know. All right, so that's a little bit annoying. That's why I don't pull this thing up, but I have to look at the video in order to look at the questions. I wish there was another way to do it. Okay, I'm just going to go through and see if anybody had other questions I can answer. Somebody said they were having dropouts, hoping that there aren't continual issues with that. I don't know if it's on their side or this side. What size is the pan? What's the oven temperature? Great question. I should have said that earlier. I'm really sorry I didn't. It's 350 degrees is the oven temperature, and we'll post the recipe online. Someone said, can I substitute full fat coconut cream? I haven't tried it, but I suspect it will be okay. Somebody else asked a question. This is a Clover specific question. Why don't we do the pickled red onions on the sandwich? So there are some hardcore pickled red onions fans out there, and we stopped doing it because we had some people who didn't like having the oniony flavor on their breath after eating the sandwich. and that was the main reason that we stopped. But I'm one of the people who really like the pickled red onion, and I know Lucia really loved pickled red onion, so maybe Lucia set up an account called Julian Camacho, or there's another fan out there. Lucia's been she's been asking us to bring back the pickled onions for a really long time. It might be something we revisit. I think there's a better version of the chickpea fritter sandwich overall, and I was hoping this year to spend time on that. Instead, we're focusing on other things, obviously, but it might be something we return to. Somebody else said, why do you use a wooden spoon to mix the dry ingredients and not a whisk? That's a really great question. Well, in this case, we're trying to reduce the number of dishes that we made dirty. And so I wanted to use the same spoon that I was using to do everything else. You could have used a whisk with the dry ingredients. I'm not sure, in the case of this with the pan, it might be a little hard to get the whisk in there, but I don't think it would hurt anything if you wanted to use a whisk. Let's see, can you use any flour? Great question. We use all-purpose flour here. I think any pastry flour would probably be okay. Bread flour would probably be okay. It would make it a little more spongy and tough, but it would probably be fine. I haven't tried this recipe yet with fresh flour. I'm sure that would also be really delicious. If anything, you might need to adjust the recipe a little bit. Probably when I say adjust, it may be add a little more liquid. The fresh wheat tends to absorb more liquid, so you usually need a little bit more. Okay, and then somebody else asked, can we post the recipe later, which we definitely will. So if anybody else has any questions, please ask them. We'll get back to them later. There's still one from the other day that I didn't get to yet, which is how do you season cast iron, and we'll definitely do a little section on that. But right now, let's frost this. Do you want to help?
Yeah.
So let's get that on here. So Blue's just going to put on the frosting that we already mixed up. Yep, that's it. Yeah, let's get all of it on there. Then we'll spread it. Don't want to miss any of it. It's like pretty scant frosting. There we go. So spread it around gently, but you want to try and cover all of it. Yeah, let me see if I can help a little bit.
Pretty big flakes.
Yeah, I sort of feel like it should be more frosting, don't you?
Yeah.
I know. It's like maybe it is. Yeah, but we'll get it all on there. Spread it all around. This is a very memorable frosting from when I was a kid. I think, like I said, there's a lot of memories I have about this cake, but it's got a really specific look and taste once you get it broiled. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here, it probably looks like I'm being a little bit fussy, but I'm trying to cover up all of the cake with the frosting because I'm not sure the cake wants to be hit with the high temperature of the broil. This is all ready now, and it worked. All that frosting covered it. So now, maybe if you want to come over here with the camera, just to get a little better view, we're going to open up the oven. And when we open this oven up, it's probably a little bit hard to see, but if you can look up under there, there's elements that are very, very hot right now, and that's the broiling element. And I'm going to put the cake underneath that. And this should happen pretty fast. So my grandma said 2 minutes in her recipe. I wouldn't be surprised if ours goes even more quickly than that. If you have a handheld torch, you could always use that here too, which is a little bit of extra excitement. But this will work sort of the same way. And I can already see it starting to bubble. When I was a kid, I always liked to watch things broil. Like you can broil all sorts of things if you guys haven't used a broiler before, but it's great for pizza toast when you're a kid, which is just a piece of bread with some tomato sauce and cheese on it. That was another early cooking memory for me. My friend Sorrel and I used to make pizza toast at his house. All right, so I'm just going to pull it out quickly so we can see what's happening a little more clearly. You can see it bubbling up nicely. We want it to keep going further than that. It's going to get to a place where there's a little bit of browning going on. Almost there. So you can broil cheese, you can broil this frosting. What else can you broil? You think of anything else we do in the broiler? Grapefruits. Brooke came up with the idea of grapefruit. So that's really yummy. Broiled grapefruit. You cut the segments out. You cut them in half, and then you cut out the segments and you put sugar on top, and then you broil it, and the sugar starts bubbling like this, and it's really yummy. So we're getting close. I'm gonna pull it out again so you can see. See, there's a little browning happening. We're gonna go a little bit farther. Trying to think of anything else we broil. Can you think of anything, Flo?
Like sometimes,
Grapefruits is a good one. Yeah.
like toasts, just
Yeah, you can broil toast. That's a good one, Blue. It's a way you can toast things. The heat it's hitting it is similar to what's hitting toast. My little sister gave me a handheld torch a couple of years ago, and now that's become our preferred way to broil things, partly because it's really exciting to see the flames. So that's getting close. I'm gonna let that go a little bit longer, but we're just about there.
oh, we use the torch.
Okay.
For, like,
Creme brulee, yep. That's a good one. Okay, here we go. So that looks awesome. We're gonna take it out now. And I'm gonna turn the oven down. So that's gonna cool and it will harden a little bit. So it becomes like a little bit crunchy. And that is Wacky cake. So thank you everybody for joining today. That's our complete show. Unless we want to wait for this to cool and take a bite of it. We'll post a little picture of it later. It'll be really yummy. We are not on tomorrow because it's Brooke's birthday. Brooke is the camerawoman. And so tomorrow we're going to take the day off to celebrate her birthday. But we're back on Wednesday. And Wednesday and Thursday this week we're going to focus on some soup recipes. And then on Friday we're going to do another bean recipe. And we've got some special guests on all of those days. So it should be a really exciting week we have ahead of us. Thank you everybody for joining.